Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another Director Battles video. This one features two of the greatest American writer-directors, not director-writers, of the last 40 going on 50 years, Paul Schrader and John Sayles. Now, as you're familiar, if you are familiar with my channel, you will know that I think Sayles is the most underappreciated director in cinema history, not to be hyperbolic. And he, for me, is the best writer-director, certainly in America, in the last 50 years. But Paul Schrader, for me, is probably number two as far as the best American writer-directors of the last 40 odd years. I mean, some people might argue Paul Thomas Anderson, but I'm not a huge Paul Thomas Anderson fan. I like every film that I've seen by him, but I don't really love any of them. I've got a lot of respect for Paul Thomas Anderson, but I don't really love any of his films. But these two guys I obviously do love a lot of their films. So we'll start with Paul Schrader, who again gave Scorsese arguably some of his best scripts. His character in Taxi Driver has followed through Schrader's career, which I'll get to. But he did start his debut as a director with Blue Collar, which is one of the greatest debuts of all time, a film that's sadly still relevant and probably will always be relevant. I recently watched Elio Petri's Lulu the Tool, or Working Class Go to Paradise, with Gian Maria Volonté, and it makes a nice double bill with Blue Collar. This is just a sensational film for a first time director. It's absolutely wonderful, dealing with three difficult actors. Richard Pryor and Harvey Keitel, Yaphet Kotto are all fantastic in it. This might have been the first Indicator that I ever bought, and it's not a bad one to start your Indicator collection with. Then he did Hardcore with George C. Scott, that actor that I'm not a huge fan of, even though I seem to have rather a lot of his films. That again is an Indicator. Then he did American Gigolo. Again, this is almost part two of the Taxi Driver kind of character. This is an Italian Blu-ray, which is actually a rather nice set. And then he did a bonkers remake of Cat People, which you can pick up in Blu-ray really cheaply. It's a lot of fun, but completely bonkers. All you need to say is Malcolm McDowell's in it, and then that kind of explains the bonkersness. And then he did Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters, which is a stunning film visually. Again, both these directors are writer-directors, not director-writers. So you could argue their films aren't, the most visually beautiful to look at, because they're more interested in the content. But obviously Mishima is the outlier in this, because it's absolutely stunning, just because it's a stylistic film in more ways than one. This is one of the most beautiful Criterion designs. Again, sometimes Criterion can be better than others as far as their packaging, but this one's pretty stunning. So that's like the start of his career. His first 5 films, which are a mixed bag as far as content and subject matter, but are all pretty stunning for his first 5 films. Then some other films on Blu-ray. Again, he is a director that probably needs more films on Blu-ray, but we'll get to that aspects of Sayles' career in a second. Comfort of Strangers, which is one of my favourites because it's got Christopher Walken with a wonderful Christopher Walken performance. Then Light Sleeper, again on Indicator. Hopefully Indicator will be releasing more Paul Schrader. Like Affliction, for example, that's got Indicator written all over it. This was one of my favourite releases of last year. I think it was last year. Willem Dafoe and Susan Sarandon. Again, this is arguably the third part of The Man Alone that started with Taxi Driver and followed with American Gigolo. Wonderful release, having it in Blu-ray. It was 1992. And of course, his latest film, First Reformed, which for a lot of people was back to Schrader on top form after a lot of films that are a little bit patchy, and he's working on a new one, or some of it was filmed, but hopefully that will be coming out at some point. But First Reformed is really good. So that's Schrader. He's also another guy who is really fascinating to listen to. He's got a great sense of humour, and again his commentaries are well worth checking out. And like I said, Schrader to me might be the second best writer-director in America in the last 40 years. But obviously, as you know, Sayles is going to be my number one in that regard. And obviously Mate Wan on Blu-ray is one of his masterpieces. Again, this was a monumental moment in my life when Criterion actually announced Mate Wan's going to get Blu-ray after so many bad prints of it existed in DVD. Again, there's not a lot of Sayles on Blu-ray, which is disgusting as far as I'm concerned, because he is an American treasure, but because of his subject matter pretty much just gets ignored. Baby It's You, bizarrely, is on Blu-ray. This is his studio adventure, which put him off making films for studios pretty much. It's still an interesting little film, Rosanna Arquette and Vincent Spano, about the end of high school, beginning of college, but it's far from his best. It was messed around with the studio and pretty much ended Sayles any flirtation with him actually making studio films. Then 8 Men Out is on Blu-ray, which again is all of films, the same way as Baby It's You. This is just a beautiful film about the 1919 Chicago White Sox betting scandal. It absolutely looks amazing despite not a lot of budget. It's got an amazing cast in it. Sayles appears himself as a newspaper man. Of course, Sayles writes, directs, edits, occasionally stars in these films as well. Then we get to the DVDs, and there's obviously a lot of them because most of these films are just available on DVD or out of print on DVD. This is the early collection, which has his first 3, Return to Secaucus 7, which was just ripped off as The Big Chill essentially, Liana, and Brother from Another Planet, which is his science fiction film, but of course it's not really a science fiction film. The thing for me that makes Sayles just the greatest screenwriter in the last 50 years is the fact you want to spend more time with his characters after the film finishes, and there's not a lot of writers that can do that. He can write for anybody of any race, any sex, any sexual orientation. It doesn't really matter. His characters are just so well written. He just has this unique ear for dialogue that's unsurpassed for me. Amigo, which I finally got last year. This is one of his later films. Again, it's a perfect example of why his films perhaps don't get releases, because it's about the Philippine-American War. His films are all socio-political and generally not particularly flag waving. This is a stunning film. I had to get this from his website. You used to be able to get it for like $200, but only if you were using it for like teaching purposes. It wasn't actually a general release, but fortunately I managed to track it down off the website, because you can see there's actually the extra features are pretty much political things, film studies, and like because it's almost sold as an educational piece rather than an entertainment piece. Again, if you've never seen Sayles, you might think, you know, these films are going to be really dry and preachy, but they're not. They're just incredible. And again, this has a Sayles commentary. It also has an interview with Sayles. Again, because this became a huge film in the Philippines, because it actually was part of their history that doesn't get talked about. Very much like Matewan is not something that's taught in American schools. Amigo is fantastic. Again, City of Hope, and as you can see, this isn't really an official release, because City of Hope doesn't even have an official DVD release. It appeared, I think, in Amazon Prime, either in the US or the UK for a little while, but it doesn't even have an official release. And again, it's a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. Obviously I'm biased. His latest film, Go for Sisters, with Edward James Olmos, made for $1 million, funded by about 4 different countries. Again, it's just another, it's not major Sayles, but it's just another beautifully written, performed, edited film made for next to nothing. In Limbo, another master work. Again, an amazing cast, because strangely enough actors want to work with Sayles because his scripts are so amazing, and one of the best endings in the last 30 years, depending on your viewpoint. And then Lone Star, which is the one where he actually got an Oscar nomination for his script. Again, a ridiculous cast, beautifully edited, about how you can't escape history, and history repeats itself, set in the Tex-Mex border. It's just a Stonewall classic. And then he followed up getting an Oscar nomination with Men with Guns, which is entirely shot in non-English, set in an unnamed Central or South American country, starring the wonderful Federico Lippi from Kronos and other things, as a doctor who goes out into the country to find his students. He realises they've all been killed, and he gets deeper and deeper into the jungle, and he learns more and more about his country. It's just an absolutely amazing film. Again, desperately needs a Blu-ray release, like all of Sayles' films do, but I'll try to jump off the soapbox a little bit. And then what might be his greatest achievement, even though, as somebody once said, your favourite John Sayles film is usually the last one you watched. Passion Fish. Again, it's another one of the why isn't Sayles more popular? Well, if you read his synopsis of his films, you can maybe see why. This is Mary McDonnell as a soap opera actress who gets paralysed in an accident and goes back to her home in Louisiana and goes through a series of home helps, and that's it, which sounds like, you know, the dullest TV movie of the week, but it's just absolutely an amazing film. Again, David Strathairn, who's a regular Sayles collaborator, is wonderful in it, and again, it's like 130 minutes and it should be 10 hours long, because you really want to spend the rest of your life with these characters. Again, a Blu-ray, anybody? Then The Secret of Roan Inish. he just decided to do a little film set in Ireland, about a local myth. And an American doing Irish films can sometimes be a little bit patronising and twee, but strangely enough, it's not, because SAYLES did it. This is actually adapted from a book. Again, it's minor sales, but it's just a beautiful little film. Then we have Silver City, which to me might actually be one of his weakest films, because the characters, you don't actually want to spend that much time with them. And again, I think he maybe did it deliberately because it is about politics. So I think he maybe deliberately didn't make them his most engaging characters that he's ever written. I think there's maybe a point to that, but unfortunately that makes it not as good as these other films. Again, this one's got a commentary. It's quite good because even though they're mostly on DVD, a lot of them have sales commentaries, and sales commentaries are arguably the best commentaries you're going to get, because he essentially tells you how to make a low budget film, as far as how to use your cast in the limited time you have them. You know, he has a lot of famous actors in his films, but he generally only has them for like a day or 2 days, so he has to use them the most he can. And he'll essentially tell you how to do that. It gives you lots of tips about screenwriting, and he should know. Obviously starting with Corman, it's about economy, but then his screenwriting is just absolutely wonderful as far as character building. Yes, that's Silver City, which to me might not actually be one of his best, but because of the characters aren't the most amazing. He also did Castillo's Babies, which is about American women going down to Mexico and adopting Mexican children because it's cheaper. Again, and then you wonder, why wasn't that a blockbuster? Yeah. And then Sunshine State, which you could argue is his last great film, in about 2003. He's only made about 2 more after that. Honey Dripper as well, with Danny Glover, is wonderful. But Sunshine State, again, gives you a history lesson about Florida, pretty much, and this myriad of characters that all cross each other's paths. Again, this one has a commentary, and it's a wonderful commentary again, about how to make the most out of what cast you actually have. But I mean, look at that cast. The wonderful Bill Cobbs. Just another absolute masterwork by Sayles. So not surprisingly, in this battle, I'm going to pick John Sayles. But Paul Schrader for me might be the second best American writer-director in the last 40 years. Again, you could argue PTA, you could argue maybe David Mamet as well. This is one of my favourites. But Schrader's stuff, Schrader at his best, is pretty damn good. But obviously, I absolutely adore Sayles. He is number 4 on my favourite directors list. So Sayles wins this, but again, let me know in the comments below who your favourite would be, and hopefully you'll join me again for more director battles. I have 4 more to do, and then I'm going to retire for 50 years. So thanks very much for watching. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Film saying farewell.